Welcome to the BPM360 podcast. I'm Russell.
And I'm Caspar. And together we will help you navigate the treacherous waters of the BPM adoption journey. I hope you enjoy the podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the BPM360 podcast. My name is Caspar, and today with me is, of course, my co-host, Russell. My friend, how are you today?
I'm great. What a beautiful day today. For the first time for weeks, it stopped raining and the sun shined through. So it's Friday again. I'm really looking forward to having a couple of not so wet days in Germany. It feels like spring, so I'm fine.
I couldn't believe my eyes when I looked at the weather forecast, and there were 2 weeks of no rain in where I live, at least forecasted. So I always want to see if that comes true, but we'll get back to forecasting probably later on anyway. But Russell, we have another guest today.
Yes,
Would you like to do the honors today?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I managed to convince Hans to join us today, so I'm really happy to have him here. And he lives in an area of Germany where it rains a lot as well. So maybe we just switch over to Hans, welcome him to our show, and ask him how the weather is in Wernigerode.
Very good. Hans, welcome to the show.
Hi. Hello, everybody. Thank you for this nice invitation. And to be honest, the weather has changed dramatically. So the forecast is the same as you mentioned earlier. And we are looking forward to having good weather the next 2 weeks. I can't believe that. But so we live in the Harz Mountains. Typically, we have other temperatures than in your region. So we have typically low temperature now forecasted for the next 2 weeks. And hopefully we will have snow again.
Oh, yeah, it's meant to get cold and dry again, which is also fine. So Hans, what we typically do in this show is we really give you a bit of space to introduce yourself. And what we liked is that if people, we've had a big range of different people, but they're all interested in business process management. So next to actually introduce yourself from what you're actually doing, if you can give us a bit of insights on your, like, say, your personal aspect, but also your becoming, let's say, your BPM becoming. So what was actually the first compelling, like, confrontation with business process management? When did it really catch a flame with you? So it's really interesting if you, in your introduction, go a bit back and then also give us a bit of an insight on how did you actually come to this topic, and then we'll delve into your, let's say, your topics that you're currently, especially as a university professor, actually dealing with, and your insights here. We wanted to get into a deeper discussion on these topics, but for now, let's say, open up the space for you to give an introduction and give us a bit of an insight on who Hans is and how Hans got to BPM.
Okay, thank you so much. But you might want to interrupt me as often as you want. And I've been teaching at Hochschule Harz University in the Harz Mountains for more than 30 years. And researching and teaching has been my favorite interest. And before this, I worked in several positions at Siemens company. And in the last century, there was a nice opportunity to go to the Harz Mountains, and this is really the best thing I could do. Teaching is really, and researching is really fascinating. And I got in contact with the SAP company very early, and I think the main idea of business process management is the lack that still exists, the gap between business process management, the missing integrity between business process management and ERP software, for example, from SAP. And there was a lot of discussion over the last tens of years. But finally, I made it to become one of the spokesmen of the SAP Academic Board. DACH. DACH stands for Deutschland, Austria, and Switzerland.
Yep.
And I'm in charge of how to improve teaching, mainly teaching. And this is also my research, that I'm fascinated by the idea, how can we improve teaching and how can we get away from just clicking through applications without having in mind that it needs to be connected with business process management. I also like the word business process management life cycle. You might have heard it pretty often. And in the business process management life cycle, there are several phases, and one phase is the automation. So a lot of years I was fascinated by the idea of automatically create application out of business process management. This is what still is not true, but maybe we are pretty close to it. And I'm at the moment, I'm more fascinated by the idea to explain my students, but also outside from the academic arena, how an ERP system really works. And this is where I came up with my approach as a wrapper. Maybe it's not only an academic wrapper for business process management. This is enterprise architecture. And the more I deep dived into the enterprise architecture, I was thinking of analogies, parallel ideas that exist in Google Maps. So more and more, I think I created a kind of Google Maps for enterprises. And so I was thinking of the idea to ease the use of business process management and in connection with enterprise architecture, and navigate with different with cars or with planes or as a pedestrian on different zoom levels through an enterprise, and understand the business side and understand the IT application side. And this is what is still missing in the academic arena, I know, and maybe this is a reason that it's also missing outside the academic arena, that still IT and business department cannot talk to each other.
Okay, so I think that's a good point, and that's something we want to really dive into more in detail. Just looking back again, you were saying that you started many moons ago, and also working at Siemens. So, but what from a let's say educational perspective, what is your background? Economics, engineer, IT? What is your origins there? Looking back,
I'm an engineer. I'm fascinated by the clear structure of engineering, and this is
the steam engine in front of the door. That's exactly your thing. Okay, so coming from engineering and then working for Siemens, that's okay. That's a classic, I would say.
That's understandable, isn't it? Yeah.
And then most probably at some time you were then, as you said, also had the opportunity to jump into academics, but the topic processes in the sense of this, as you also say now, business and IT having to talk to each other, understand each other, but this term business process management and process management, when was the first time that you actually encountered this, and when did you see like a special occasion or a situation where it struck you that this is a topic you're gonna go down the rabbit hole into depth? Was it in academics time, or was it already at Siemens that you were exposed to the process management topic?
Wow, difficult to say. I think it really started in the academic area pretty soon when I came and got in contact with the idea of abstraction, which fits well to the academic arena. Not only think in instances, but in information models. And I was fascinated, so I found more and more information models describing several aspects. And at a certain time, I thought this is still not sufficient. This is not enough. Why is it not working? And then I deep dived and found other approaches. A very long time I was teaching database, and I like the idea of referential integrity, but I saw that referential integrity is missing. If we just want to combine a data with an activity or with a role or stuff like this, there are no meta model information. Maybe I'm too deep diving too early.
No.
This is exactly what I was going to jump into, because you said this term enterprise architecture.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, we're talking business process management. And Caspar and I, we've been talking about this a lot, how there is like this, as you say, the integrity between these thinking models is not there. Yeah. So you have these like compartments they're talking the same, and they're looking at a big overlap on certain objects in this meta model, but they all have their own view, and nobody's really wanting to understand. So they will say, let's map, and we'll integrate by mapping, but they're not thinking of like a common model. So, like with magnetism and magnetism, sometimes they've always been, scientists have always been trying to work on one complete model where all the different aspects of gravitation and electricity and magnetism, it all flows into one big model that explains all. And this striving, I've also always been really missing. So this says, I do my part, you do your part, and somehow we have a common rough understanding, but it's not really consistent in the way that the things fit together. So what I do like about your work, your research, and the models you've been working on is trying to cover all aspects. Right. And bringing them into one consistent methodology. And I think that's the challenge. That's what my understanding is in a nutshell, in having the Google Maps approach, but you're not having like one map that covers, say, like the, what's it called, the topography, and one that has the streets, but you have an idea over layers that you actually combine the different aspects of a complete enterprise, like the whole from IT to business, from strategy down to operations and IT functions, to bring everything into one common model. Is that like so? Maybe you can just give us also a bit of an insight on how long have you been working on this model, and what aspects of how did you start on this, and in how far is there say, do you have the model? Is it done? And how is this evolving, and what disruptions have been coming in? If you compare that with the maybe even your stakeholders, even SAP has been coming up with new ideas on architecture, on the way they want to deploy, and maybe you give us a bit of first of all, just because there's a lot of topics we can cover here. Say, how do you get to this model, and what where did you start, and how did it evolve? What challenges do you have? So give us a bit of a storyline here.
Thank you so much for being so curious on finding out what really took me a lot of time, but in the academic arena I was paid really for this fun. It was really interesting, and every day I found out, wow, it's really missing, and like a puzzle, I brought together the missing parts, but finally I thought, wow, it was that easy. Why didn't we came up with this idea earlier? So the first idea is enterprise architecture is two-dimensional. We have two dimensions, and there's for example the Internet Explorer is one dimension, So, but you need two dimensions. For example, you need the topics, but you need at the same time the year, for example, in the So you have to double. You have redundancies, but if you have a clear two-dimensional structure like in Excel, so you have rows and columns, and the columns. Or the rows goes across each column. So, but if you look at existing enterprise architecture, they have an A1, B1, C1. Okay, this is Excel, and this is where you go horizontally, right? You cross typically columns. But if you look in POCA, for example, so you have a column. This is business, organization, objectives, data application, but if you go to the next level, then in the application arena, you can dive deeper and get closer to the implementation. But if you look at other maps, there's an inconsistency. You cannot navigate horizontally, which gives you the idea. This is the idea of Excel. This is the idea of 2-dimension, that every time you are able to look where you are and you can go horizontally and vertically and understand better. Russell mentioned joint language. I think a joint language is not necessary, but you need that the different languages are connected correctly. Yeah?
This
is what let me just give you some more ideas. That is the hierarchy. This is the next question, the hierarchy. Okay, so when you compare it with Google Maps, what is the hierarchy? What is the hierarchy in Google Maps? If you look at different maps, pedestrian, train, plane, car, it is, what is the zoom factor? Miles, right? But what are the miles in an enterprise architecture? What is the zoom factor in enterprise? So in the most enterprise architectures like TOGAF, the closer you get to the implementation, this is typically down, yeah? And when you go down, when you go more in detail, when you go on a deeper level, you go to the implementation. And but of course, this makes sense for data view, that makes sense for application view. But how would the application look like of organization or of processes, and how can we measure them? Then I thought, wow, in typically enterprise architectures, you have different zoom factors. For example, that would be compared to enterprise architecture to Google Maps. If you would decompose a street map with the parts of a car, so suddenly you have an object-oriented hierarchy. So this is true in enterprise architecture, that you have different hierarchy levels. So, and then it took me 10 years to find out that it is not object-oriented. It's not kilometers or miles. It's not service-oriented. This is another typical approach in IT and database, but it's process-oriented. Okay, and it's not easy in the process view to have a process-oriented hierarchy. And it's also not that difficult, but it took me also years to really find out that it just is a turn by 90 degrees to have a process-oriented organization. But how can you apply it to the application? How can you apply it to the motivation, which is important for business people? And so I came up with different model types. This produces new complexity. Maybe it's too academic what I found out.
No,
and
but just
just
to comment on that, because it's an interesting observation that you make and a statement that you make. I mean, the experience I have in talking to enterprise architects is that there seems to be a disconnect between the process world on one hand and the architect world on the other hand. But in fact, they're actually quite complementary. They need each other. And I came across the first client this very week, that actually told me they were using an enterprise architecture tool. And they said the hierarchy structure of the processes, the structure is maintained in our enterprise architecture tool and replicated into the BPM tool, so you can actually fill in the details for the process levels. But we need that structure in the enterprise architect tool so we can use that to link to the applications and the capabilities that they have, which are typical topics for EA.
Yeah.
And that's what exactly. So, and that's what I think we've been talking about when integrating, say, tools like enterprise architecture tools to process management tools. It's always a discussion on how do we actually consolidate the hierarchies, so that according to the way Hans thinks, he says, if I go down the column A to the level 3, I need to be able to move horizontally and have a corresponding level on the other column.
Absolutely.
In the easy terms, he said, go down the process to level 3, and I go to the application. I have to have let's say, a corresponding hierarchical, like granular, level, that makes sense on that level. That I also have the processes, and so you can say principally everybody's talking about hierarchies and their objects or like their dimensions, but actually slice and dicing them, that you do then have, like you say, a two-dimensional matrix where you cannot just navigate down and up, go to the left and down and up, but I can actually go down and then across, and it still is consistent with what you see here. That's, I think, fundamentally what on an academic level Hans has been working on, and that's what is the result of this EOG, correct?
Yeah, yeah. I call it Enterprise Online Guide. That is, it sounds a little bit old-fashioned, and it's it is kind of a guide. It is a structure, it's an architecture and a framework, but at the same time, it is filled with content. So at a certain time, I thought, how could the students all over the world just learn an ERP software? Maybe say SAP, for example. Yeah.
I was a certified customizer for a long time for the MM module, so I try to forget that, but
okay.
I know SAP.
And they were just clicking through the application in the academic environment, and no one was happy, neither the teacher, neither the students. And then I came up with the idea with certain tools. Now I've used many other tools, always with the same approach, depicting what's happening on the business side, what is behind the scenario on the business side, but pretty often it's not mentioned in the case studies. I call it case study. It's clicking. But I was fascinated, and it was a green field. There was nothing. There was no competition. There was no professor, no other institute that was thinking even of this idea to do a re-engineering of existing case studies all over the world. Finally, I came up with other case studies for sustainability and for digitalization and security management, which is a very interesting case study. The BSI standard is process oriented, and it's great to depict it in an enterprise architecture. But first, I started with material procurement. Earlier, it was called material management.
Material management.
Purchased.
Purchasing, purchasing,
okay, and so on. And now they are called end-to-end processes. And this world was changing, but in my architecture, it was always fitting. I thought, this is level this, and this is this approach, and this is this map. And
you were decomposing use cases from a real hands-on, practical, appliance. You were then decomposing them according to your, let's say, your structure that you had, like your meta model, but filling it with life. And this is then the baseline also for structuring teachings and trainings. Is that the idea?
Yeah.
Oh, and I have a case for you now, for both of you, actually. Because this is something I run into on an almost daily basis whenever I do advisory on BPM with my clients, is they show me their current hierarchy structure. L1, L2, L3. Brilliant. L1 very often is really just a domain overview. Finance, procurement, marketing, sales, fine. And then in L2, I all of a sudden see a hybrid mix of, I have finance, and then I all of a sudden have a domain called record to report, then I have a procure to pay, and then I have a HR again. So it's that mix of end-to-end and, let's say, functional decomposition. And my personal view, but I love to hear yours, my personal view is please don't mix that. Please just keep a functional decomposed structure, and you keep an end-to-end structure, and you need to maintain them in parallel. But how would that fit into the EUG concept, Hans?
Yeah, pretty easy. You need, not that easy. Of course, you have a bunch of hierarchies in your organization still.
Exactly, yeah.
So they should be process-oriented and stuff like this. And so what I learned from analytics, from several tools, which model type has been using was very surprising or confirming what you are saying, that in the academic arena, they are mainly teaching BPMN, let's say 70%, and only 10% of them are teaching organization at the same time. And this is a pity, because every lane,
Yeah.
Every pool needs to have a very clear idea. This is what I call convention, how it is related to the organizational structure. And of course, you need also to describe the organizational structure in a process-oriented way. And it's not the entire stuff turned by 90 degrees, but then I came with a role concept. And the role concept it exists in my approach only in level 3. And by the way, the system information or system unit organizational structure of some ERP systems also needs to be turned by 90 degrees. And then it took me also years. And suddenly everything fits together. And for example, the CEO has his role, position, organization on level 1, for example, but his role is always on level 3. So in every BPM-N diagram, Caspar, but I'm afraid this wouldn't help what I say, because I know that typically they have BPM-N models, they have unbelievable ideas of how they decompose them. But I teach my student that at the same time, every lane they are creating in BPM-N needs to be a copy of existing organizational structure. And they need to start with the organizational structure. And I think that this helps as a consultant to have a certain idea where you are talking about before we start with the processes. Though they say processes are independent and they need to go across organizations. But I think this is in the academic arena, it is possible. And I have, if you would measure the amount of model types I'm creating, then BPM-N would have the same amount as balance scorecard, as business model canvas, as organization, as data model. And maybe this is only true in academic arena, but one of the ideas is that we have references. I created more than 990 models in different tools.
Oh, wow.
And very, very easy you can say, if you go with a new company, in organization, for example, I only have abbreviation is O. Okay, we have 3 levels, O1, O2. This needs to be combined or adjusted to a new company, but level 3 in organization and the depending P3, sorry, this is the P, this is the abbreviation for the process, and this really, really, really helps, because I absolutely know, and I have the feeling I spend the most of the time with my students, which typically have to describe their company, where they came from, where they have done their got their experiences, to find out how they can combine processes on 3 different levels, and the organization that has more than 3 levels, of course, how they can do it, but at a certain time, all of us and the other classmates understand what's going on. This is really was for me a great experience, but I know it's time consuming.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I think what you have to consider as well is, of course, depending on the use case of process management in an enterprise. Yeah, so we're talking about digitalization, we're about clarifying, they say, the processes to be able to implement them. You will be focusing on, let's say, I think it's the 3rd level, where you have like roles and you have the activities in a process, so level 3 or level 4, and that's where you go into the details of maybe modeling the BPM-Ns. But the principal idea of having like a hierarchy level organization 2 and having a corresponding process, and I call it structure. It's not a BPM-N with a lane. You can have your own, but the granularity of that's our thinking here is say, okay, so what are we talking about on level 2? We're talking about ownership and accountability, and the corresponding organizational or roles or structures that you have corresponding to that level. And the granularity then cuts, so it's the purchasing domain, And they say, okay, so here we're talking about the ownership on that level of O2, and going down, we get down to a role that corresponds to the actual, let's say, processes on the detail where you actually also use them. So who are the processes for on level 3, and who are the processes / process structures on level 2, 4? what are they for? So I think next to the model having like this clear hierarchy, it's also always important for companies to think about what do they actually use these levels for? Which ones do they need to focus on? Which ones are relevant for the actual initiative they're digging into? That's why there is a lot of focus on the BPM ends on a level 3, 4 and having the corresponding roles there, because that's where you need the authorizations, you need the IT functions, you need, you need, there's a lot of work, detailed work to think about. But having a common navigational orientation over the maps and the hierarchies, the process architecture, that's something that where, and coming back to your question, Caspar, I think that's where there's a bit of a mix-up. Yeah, they have let's have one map, and they're mixing up levels, they're mixing up end-to-end and functional like hierarchies, the dimensions. So and then they'll put a bubble there for the organization level 1. Why? Because they want to simplify having just one entry map, but they're not really thinking about how important it is to have clear dimensions and hierarchies to organize actually all the outcomes that they have. And that's why I think, say Hans has the freedom to be consequently academic and fill it in detail and take specific use cases and work them out. But that's what I think is it's a good guideline to say, okay, so yes, we know it's academic, but the key principles that are behind it can be very well exemplified, and that's where I think the trading comes in, where Hans does a lot of work with helping students to learn, but also companies to learn ERP and business, because they have this clear, consistent model that is not, say, half enterprise architecture and then somehow BPM whatever model and then TOGAF here and something there, but it's like a unified, I would say simplified, but it's a unified. Well, maybe it's a unified model. It's a unified model. It's a unified model to work on. Yeah, and that's why it's
a mix of best of breed. Yeah, really. Yeah, absolutely.
But then I have another question. I mean, I like where this is going, and I've worked with ERPs and I've worked with SAP since 2001 actually, for a long time. But what I'm encountering a lot is that organizations have to, when they start to implement an ERP or they need to migrate to a new version of ERP, they very often need to make a conscious decision between, do I have the application lead how my process looks like, or do I have the process lead how the application should support this? And so basically it's standardization versus customization. What is your point of view on that, Hans? Because a lot of organizations struggle with that particular dilemma.
Okay. Could you repeat this idea?
Yeah, sure. So imagine
maybe I got it, but please.
No, you're implementing SAP or Oracle, but let's stick with SAP. SAP has a set of best practices. It has a standardized way,
I know,
or a preferred way of executing a process. If you ask SAP how does procure to pay be executed, then you know exactly which transactions they want you to do.
Absolutely.
Organizations very often have I would say the incorrect perception that they are special, and that they think that their procure to pay process is different than what SAP tells them it should be. How would you deal with that dilemma? So what would you tell an organization? Listen, do we stick with our own way of working, knowing that it might be a problem having it supported by SAP, or do we need to change our organization to match it up with how SAP in this case proposes or suggests us to work? Because those are the two options that you have.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a question. This is also, and the answer is influenced by the idea of cloud solution that we say. Yeah. So the more and more we are, the race has been won by the vendor. So finally the clients need to fulfill the ideas of the cloud application structure. Otherwise, they cannot survive in the circle of innovation that goes faster and faster and faster. But at the same time, there is an academic idea that also fits that for example, in SAP, we have the fact that we have to map a organization, a typical organization that might consist of 10 or more levels, and we have also kind of a hierarchy in the system organization. So this is close to the application. I think you were talking about the idea of mapping application with business demands, and this is and very often there is if you start a presentation of the vendor, you see the company code and the sales organization, and there's several levels, and they have the typical organization. And I thought of process-oriented structuring, and it really helped me to do not only the 90-degree turn by on the latest on the deepest level, on level 3 of the organization, where we have all rows of each person, CIO and whatever. And this only needs to be mapped to the P3, where the music plays. Do we say this? This is what I call workplace. The levels are called company. Second level is department. Third level is workplace. And the fourth level is experience. So I was thinking, what is the implementation? No? Well, of the database, there is a referential integrity. The experience is you cannot enter an entity, a data which is missing in the related table. Okay, but we also have customer experience in the motivation on level 4. We have the employee experience. We have the user experience in the application. We have in the business capability, we have the SLAs, service level agreements, and stuff like this. And this
I like that. So I must say, I love that, Hans.
This is so true. Yeah.
So I like the idea of saying, because you know what I always bugs me. It says you go to a company and say, you're level 3, and I'm saying, level 3. Do we have the common understanding of level 3? So nobody's giving it.
This is a workplace. This is a workplace.
And then you half an hour later you said, your level 3 is my level 4, and you go, okay.
Yeah, so we need a name.
So what I completely buy in, and I'm gonna really
face to face.
I'm gonna take that workplace and experience. So but that would be say like the BPMN like process level workplace. But the level activity where you're actually then having to put data in and do things, interact with systems, that's the experience level. Yeah. I buy that. I'm gonna bring that in. I really like that in communication. The levels above, and sometimes they have another, because they have an enterprise level and they have a business unit. But actually coming bottom up, experience, workplace, and then and then coming up to department / like domains. I really like that. God, that's something I'm going to directly took a note on. I'm going to put that into action tomorrow. Saturday. No, it's Saturday, not tomorrow. Monday.
Wonderful.
Monday. Yeah.
Monday. No, I like it.
And I was paid for this, really. It came year after. I said, yes, as a professor, and then I could also apply it in my courses. And the students, they liked it or they hated it, because it is another complexity. It is an abstraction. But I said, hey, students, you are in a university. You are used to work but in instances only, but in abstraction. Yeah,
that's good. That's good that you've been paid for it, because then I don't have to pay you for taking this idea. That's already it. I always write down copyright by and always refer to you.
Please mention my copyright.
Yeah, absolutely.
I had a discussion with E.ON. Then when I was going to the German Patentamt and for the EOG, which by the way finally it worked. But E.ON, energy company, they said, Hans, your E.ON, your EOG looks like our E.ON, huh? So a big bunch of Anwälte?
Lawyers.
Lawyers.
And I said, okay. And then they said, never, please never change EOG to red. I said, okay, I can promise it. And then I was so brave, and I wrote to the lawyers, but promise me and sign that you will never change Eon color to blue. And they signed.
But the thing is, you should have sued them because you've been on the market with EOG longer than they have with Eon.
Yeah.
So you could have actually said, you're gonna have to now. You have to Eon. You have to change the company name because I've been on the market longer than you. And it is Eon and EOG. Yeah, but that's typical Lloyd's. Yeah.
They said another agreement. They said whenever we approach new markets, Eon and EOG will work together closely.
Well, the thing is, we do know from Eon they have a lot of process management going on. I think we're also involved with one of the subsidiaries of Eon doing process management. So maybe you should have written in that they have to follow your EOG architecture, or maybe we just go there together and talk to them about and say, because what I saw is a quite a mix of hierarchies and architectures being cuddle muddle. They could but it's,
I don't want to be difficult about that, but you'll encounter me again because I think they just become a customer of ours.
I know you also in there in some spaces, but I think there's
not
a
everywhere
whole,
maybe, but
I would say it's a zoo.
A lot of large companies actually are a zoo from that perspective, and which is interesting because from an enterprise architecture point of view, I mean, I was working with or advising actually one of the Dutch government ministries this week. And then we came to the conclusion that they're actually using like 3 or 4 different BPM tools at the same time. It's like, okay, so what's the benefit in that? And there was no answer. It was just every organization, every department, so every level 2 in your language, Hans, was using their own BPM tool. And I said, listen, where is your enterprise architecture plan and where is your overarching BPM plan? And that should be aligned. So let's see what we can do. But it's something I run into very often, that organizations simply don't have an overall holistic plan for this.
And I think just to add one on before Hans, you can answer as well your thoughts on this. I think the issue is it would be okay if they have different tools, if they have different use cases and they have their own user groups. But really fundamentally as an enterprise to work on one common meta model, coming back to your ideas here, that is something where I said that's where they should sit more together, spend more time, not say which tool is better than the other, but really trying to align on their hierarchies and on their meta model. So like taking like a EOG as a baseline and thinking, where could we align more on what we have in content in these tools. And that's where I see a big difference on as well, that it's not just the tools, but it's also a lot about all the content, the hierarchies, and what they've built up there.
Right. And this also fits to the academic environment. And of course, I cannot teach the student only one tool, only business process management tool. Of course, there are several.
No, of course not. No.
And I was so happy that I could easily transform the existing content to different tools, but just strictly following the rules. That one of the rules, for example, Caspar, that if you have sub-departments that they are covered on a specific, so we have company, you have the subsidiaries, you have the next level of departments. Of course, you have might have a department structure, and you need a rule which of these departments is the leading one, which is finally related to the BPM-N. But in the academic way, this is the global buy company. It has a complex structure, and we manage it, and we have clear rules where we can say, okay, even if you have more, then it looks like this. So and stuff like this. I also like the idea of Google Maps when we get back to the which inspires me and helped me so much. That coming back to the BPM-N and workplace. So this is kind of face-to-face, and we could perhaps compare the pedestrian map of Google Maps with BPM-N. Yeah. So, but for example, we have other maps. We have a bike. This could be perhaps the idea of sustainability. This is better. And this is, it is another view. And we also have public transport and plane that might be the best practice. So this is the one is individual. It's typically on the workplace. And if you go by plane, by public transport, but you need combination. In the pedestrian map, you need at a certain level of abstraction, you need the train station or the airport to find it. And this is a meta model. This is a meta model of the enterprise architecture Earth, our lovely Earth. And this is always helped me. And then it also helped me to argue you wouldn't get to by bicycle or by foot from New York City to Hamburg. So this is another argumentation which it lacks a little bit. But it helps to identify that other information, other models, other objects that are included, that are combined, related typically in a model, needs to be taken into account.
Yeah. So what my analogy there with the maps is that when you get down and when you say from a process perspective, you want to go to Hanover by car, and it shows you, you've got different route possibilities, a fast one, an economical one. So there's different ways of getting from A to B. But when you come down to Hanover and you zoom in, you then need a different context depending on, do you want to park your car, or do you need to fill up with petrol station, or do you need to get to your hotel? And so here, going into certain levels and then seeing correlated, let's say, facets, as Caspar would say, or objects that are related to this on this level. So as soon as you're, let's say, on a higher level, the context of, let's say, this, just to explain also, I think this horizontal model view, of course, you don't want to have, if you say, search me all petrol stations, when you've zoomed out and you have the whole stretch between, let's say, Düsseldorf and Hanover, it just blows up, doesn't it? And there's no aggregation level for petrol stations. So the petrol stations and the hotels and the parking places, on a zoom level, they make sense. So this object type on that granularity makes sense on a certain zoom level, and then the relation is meaningful. And this is something where the navigation guide on which level you actually have which relations and facets actually enriched, and having dynamic views is something I think is very valuable for this whole navigation through these maps. But Hans, I have one or two questions concerning, let's say, the way things have changed a bit, also specifically around the SAP world, because we're talking about cloud and this who changes whom in this journey. But the whole, in how far has your, let's say, your thinking and your model actually influenced the SAP thinking around, let's say, their taxonomy? Because I saw a model not too long ago. Just my camera's just gone crazy here. Just dropped off. The suction pad, I've got this one in the middle of it. It just started falling down. And it wasn't my head wobbling, it was the camera. And
we noticed that, yeah.
So I saw this, this like taxonomy model from SAP. And they have like the solution processes. I think, now it's a very big focus around the scope items when going into cloud. The level of granularity where a lot of focus around the transformation is happening is in these side. So in how far are you in discussion with them, or are you having to adapt your let's say, your model to encompass the SAP taxonomy now that they're moving forward in direction of cloud and are shifting from the classical pure, let's say, transactional experience level to the process level of workplace? And there is this this mid layer of solution processes that is it's like a mid layer between an end-to-end scenario and the workplace level. It's like a different scope of let's say, IT ERP context that is now to be allocated in such a hierarchy, which for navigation, because people are all talking about, let's say, SAP scope items, the solution processes. And do you have current discussions here? Do you need to adapt your model, or are you in contact with SAP how this gonna be fit in?
I think, wow, this is a long way. Of course, I'm trying to convince SAP that I found the best solution to solve most of the problems, and but they asked me to become really one of the two spokesmen of the SAP academic board, and they know that I'm fascinated by this idea, and they pretty often invite me to business process open lectures as a speaker, or to they promote my train the trainer courses that I'm nothing is paid. I'm independent, and maybe one day I should ask. But it's an honor.
Do a shout out. Do a shout out of the podcast.
I'm basically
Yeah, absolutely true.
and this is a wonderful work that we have together now in the academic arena, and I'm seeing they really appreciate it. They're really interested, and maybe this is a wonderful position I have in the academic arena, to be also able to talk about competition and compare plus and minus of different approaches. And I had a lot of discussion, long time discussion, lasting over years with enterprise architects, but they suddenly disappeared in the huge SAP company. But I think I inspired. I was in contact with most of the SAP people that deal with enterprise architecture, and they are still on the TOGAF level, and we even brought out together some papers, which I could provide. Maybe I don't know how we catch up this broadcast today. I don't know whether we are providing links, but there are
we can.
What is the outcome that SAP and my name is on a publication saying that EOG would in this case better fit to the existing structure. For example, we did the Signavio Process Explorer redesign to better understand the typical problem that you're also facing every day. Different views. One is the solution, the cloud solution you just mentioned, and the business capabilities and the end-to-end processes. And you could deep dive with hierarchies, but you were lost, completely lost. You never get back.
No,
unbelievable.
True.
And then we did this redesign, but I don't have the power. But maybe this is the best what could happen.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah,
because to be in this position, and this is a wonderful collaboration. They are really, it's an honor. And they ask me at least in the academic arena, and I think it's really worth it. I think I'm proud of it, and I think I'm doing a good job for the professors. They suffer. They still suffer. They haven't found out the potential that we have in the digitalization of teaching and learning. And getting away from just clicking through application. And SAP knows that I'm convinced by this idea, and I know what I'm talking about. So they asked me to teach the teacher, the professors all over the world, kind of in this position.
That's really nice. I'm going to have to play my timekeeping card, Russell, because time flies, and we're approaching the end of today's episode. I'm afraid we can talk about this for hours and days. I'm pretty sure. Is there any last things that you would like to know from Hans, Russell, before we close out today? You always have a list of things you want to ask, and there's always more on the list than the one that I give you room for. But I'm going to make you choose again.
So you've now come to a certain situation, Hans, where you have your model. So what are you working on in the next 5 years? What are your plans? What's the next big thing that you see upcoming? Where you want to dig into research and
Thank you for asking this. I'm so convinced that it can rescue us a little bit, rescue our lives, our experiences in the upcoming ongoing AI world. That I had the honor to, together with you, Russell, to find out that I call it ontology-based AI that enterprise architecture, which is really like a digital twin filled with information. And at a certain time, we could ask ChatGPT questions, not about everything on the web, but concerning just restricted amount of models, for example, and would get a good answer, and we could rely on this answer. I don't know whether this would solve all the problems, but I'm convinced by this idea. I haven't known this before. And you, Russell, thank you. I want to say this in this scenario today, that I was really convinced. I couldn't believe it, but you said, finally you came up and said, okay, I could read your model, and I could really finally with ChatGPT ask, and we got wonderful answers, and we presented it at an SAP conference. And this was another ongoing discussion, and SAP keeps going to ask me, how can we implement it?
Yeah, cool.
Thank you.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah,
cool.
Yeah. So we got something to work on. I'm looking forward to that, Hans. Yeah, we'll have to eat that. Good.
Brilliant. Thank you. I mean, that was just awesome, Russell. I enjoyed that. Hans, thank you very much for taking the time out your busy schedule to be with us today. We sincerely enjoyed it. We hope you did too.
Yeah, I really did. Well, thank you
very
so
good.
It's an honor for me too. Believe me.
That's good to hear. And then in that case, I would say thank you to our listeners who are going to hear this about in a week and a half from now, I guess. And I wish you all a very pleasant weekend. Bye-bye.
Have a great time.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.